How's everybody doing today?
I think we all do it at the same time.
That was great. I love it. We've got such an incredible panel for you today. All right. I'm just saying it's incredible. It might suck. We don't know. We'll have to get there. Anyway, my name is Glenn Hausman, and I host the No Vacancy podcast. I also do a show called Friday Night Audit, which is about comedy and cocktails. It's usually funnier if you're drinking too much. You can't handle our senses of humor. But I'm really excited to be here today doing this particular panel. And what an upgrade in a room we got this year, guys. This is awesome. Last year we were in a van in the Motel 6 parking lot down the road. So this is so much better for us. Today, what I'd really like to do is I want to make sure that all of you are getting the answers that you need. So it's absolutely okay if you want to ask questions and participate in this panel. I host a podcast for an hour every day, so I can certainly talk a lot, but I want it to be meaningful for each and every one of you, particularly since we've got such a great group of professionals with us. On the far side of me, we've got Noah Silverman, Global Development Officer, USA and Canada with Marriott International. Let's hear it for him. Wow. Lukewarm. I don't know. Come on. Noah's better than that. There we go. And the incredible Julienne Smith, Chief Development Officer, Americas with IHG Hotels and Resorts. Celebrating her one-year anniversary of being named to that position. That was the big news when we were here last year. I remember, Jim and Chip tried calling me out because I didn't get to the announcement quick enough.
You had a good memory.
Oh, it's very tragic. Jim Tierney, SVP Development with Hyatt Corporation. And of course,
raise the roof, Jim.
Yeah, and of course, the one and only Brad LeBlanc, SVP, Chief Development Officer with Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Let's hear it for him. So today we're talking about the secrets of successful brands. And to me, the secret of a successful brand has to hit a bunch of different areas. Number one, it has to be great for customers. They want to come back time and time again. But it also has to be something that's affordable and profitable for the owners and developers that are building those particular properties. So we're going to try to come to a mix of both of those. Some of the opportunities that we see in the market by understanding what customers are really looking for as travel products and needs and desires continue to evolve, as well as how these folks see the industry coming together to help keep building new hotels and keep our industry excited. Now, the one thing that I find interesting, everybody, is every single year we're here, there's a new set of problems, right? And I think that one of the things that we do is we tend to take everything super seriously, as if we've never hit these problems before, right? Now, I'm a big believer, if we made it through 2020 and 21, if we made it through 2008 and 2009, whatever's going to be coming, in my personal opinion, will not be nearly as bad. And I think our experience of getting through those other things will inform us on how to go forward. However, things are changing, and I think it's really important to just get out right there in the front and just talk about this regional bank issue that's happening. So many developers out there rely on that. Noah, what's your feeling about this whole situation that's been developing over the last few weeks?
We're going to talk about this quickly and then just
move on
to another topic.
I don't want to not address it, because then people will be like, oh, they didn't talk about regional banking. So real quick.
Breaking news, that's a bit of a challenge right
now,
right? But I think to your point, Glenn, and I actually remember, because of when I started in this industry, the recession and post 9/11 period as well in 01, 02. So if you've been around a number of years, you've seen downturns. Clearly, the COVID-related downturn was the worst. But we know it's cyclical. We know there are times that we're going to go through bumpy patches. Debt, the availability of debt, the cost of debt is a patch that we see bumpy from time to time, and we're sort of in that right now. In some ways, we've sort of been in that in various forms with various severity for the last couple of years, right? I mean, banks largely shut down for new construction lending for about 6 months following the onset of COVID. Most of the big brands, ourselves included, have been sort of challenged around our net unit growth goals, in part because of the availability and cost of financing and its sort of connectivity to our growth, given our choice of business model, right? Where we're not the ones building and owning and developing the hotels ourselves. So, we've been experiencing those challenges for a couple of years, and like most things, this too shall pass. I think the key for us as a brand company, which you sort of hinted at in your opening remarks, is to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to be successful in delivering experiences to customers that cause them to want to come and fill our hotels, because the higher that we can drive things like ADR and generate profitability for owners, the more they're able to overcome some of the things like higher interest rates on their debt. And we need to be laser focused on the things that allow the top line money to flow through to the bottom line as well. So if we keep our eyes on the various prizes that you identified at the outset, which is the guest experience and the owner experience around profitability, we'll get through this. We'll get through it successfully.
Cool. For someone who didn't really want to answer too much, that was a very thorough answer on that. Do any of you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what Noah said, right?
He summed it up. I mean,
I think it's interesting because early on, right, we were really juggling construction costs and soaring, escalating cost, and then the interest rates kicked in, and it was trying to juggle two things at a time. I think what Noah said was spot on. I think it's interesting that, I think most of the brands now are trying to figure out how do you get creative in the use of your balance sheets, right, to get these projects moving forward. And that's where we are today. But it's challenging. Deals are getting done. We don't know when they're going to get in the ground. So we're doing everything that we can at Hyatt, right, to move these things forward by using our balance sheet.
Yeah.
And Noah mentioned, our chosen business model, which is we only have control over a certain amount of pieces. So providing some deal incentives or filling the gaps the best that we can is something that we can do. And then being laser focused on the efficiencies within our brands and making sure that they're absolutely as cost efficient as we could possibly make them and still deliver that consumer experience. I mean, that's the constant evolution and work that our teams focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive into that specific point in just a little bit. Brad, did you want to add anything?
Congratulations, Fed. You finally broke something.
Right.
You did. I mean, their job is to control. They have two simple jobs, control inflation being one of them. And they pushed interest rates so high, so fast, they finally broke something. Is that the only thing broken? Wait and we'll see. Right.
Yeah. So it'll be an interesting story to follow. But I like to be a little contrarian because I'm not in the trenches like all of them are every single day. So I might be coming at this like a little bit naive. But it seems to me that interest rates used to be so much higher before the Great Recession that we almost kind of got spoiled with like almost zero rates recession. And it's kind of reset our perception of what interest rates should be. So I think there's a psychology that's kind of creating that aura of negativity as opposed to just looking back 15 years to where we were, and it might still be better with interest rates. Am I crazy or am I on?
No, I think you're spot on, right? I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the folks that we talk to, right, are comparing rates to back to, right, 10, 11, 12 in the last cycle and just struggling, right, with paying more, north of 4%.
Right.
And that's unfortunately the reality. But
yeah, I mean, there's probably a slight bit more to it than just psychology. Clearly, there's a little post-traumatic stress that the sort of everyone's dealing with that you do need to kind of reset expectations. I mean, the industry was fueled by cheap, plentiful capital really for a decade. And while by sort of historic terms, it's not, it's still not where it once was. I mean, I remember interest rates in the 70s, right? Or if you sort of go around the globe, there are plenty of places that have been challenged by interest rates in the double digits or low teens. We're not there yet, but we are in a different place than we were. The sort of compounding challenge beyond just the psychology, though, is that that's happened in an inflationary environment that, yes, has had a positive impact on ADRs, but has also had a negative impact in terms of labor costs, construction costs, everything else. And so the sort of the historical comparison around what's sort of an interest rate that can work and making the economics of these projects work from an owner perspective has been challenged by those factors as well that haven't sorted themselves out and may not for quite some time. So there's some resetting of expectations that needs to happen, but there also needs to be kind of that continued focus on how do we make this profitable as an investment for our owners and franchisees.
Right. Interesting. Brian?
Everyone on this couch is driven by two things: access to capital for conversions or new construction, right? So that access to capital just got very expensive, and it's going to get more expensive, and it's going to get harder to get.
Right.
I think all of us would agree with that. So what happens in the next chapter? It's really interesting. It's the first time, right? We see the business. Everyone's bullishly optimistic, cautiously optimistic, and all that stuff. Right, we do have an industry that's doing this, but we have a development community that's shaking a little bit.
Right. But again, I see the people that make bold moves in these times are the ones that really do best in the long run. So no matter, I think the lesson to be taken away from this portion of the conversation is absorb what everybody is saying, but don't allow it to prevent you from making the good, successful moves that you're going to be happy you made in 5 years from now. But moving on from that, I think that because it's getting more expensive to build hotels, to go back to your point, Julienne, you really have to have a product that's focused specifically on what the consumer needs as opposed to what they claim they want. And all of your companies have done a great job of putting together a wonderful panoply of brands that really hit different consumer touch points over there. So, Julienne, how are you overall thinking about where the consumer is meeting and how to meet them in the right place that keeps that franchise community hacy?
Yeah, and I'm really impressed that you used the word panoply.
I did that on my SATs when I was 17, really and I've been using it ever since.
It's very good. So obviously, we need to create brands that the consumers want to spend their money in and spend their time in. And it's always that dance between what they want, because if you put out a consumer survey, of course they want free breakfast, a pool, they want all of the things, but are they actually going to pay for those things? Right. So understanding kind of what that price point is and delivering that. I think what's consistent is consumers want new and fresh, right? So we're coming out of an environment that's been very restrained financially, and there are a lot of properties that need capital improvements. Right. And when we're in this environment, that becomes difficult. So not every hotel can be new. That's certainly not sustainable. We've got many open hotels, but they need to be renovated and fresh in order to create that consumer experience. And that's a dance too, because owners are out of capital. They've gone through their capital reserves in a lot of cases. Yep. So being able to support them in that way, and again, what we have control over is negotiating the prices of FF&E, helping supply chain issues. We can't control it, but we can certainly help it in some ways. Right.
To give a little context for the younger people in our audience that haven't been in the industry yet, when the COVID crisis hit, the brands were absolutely amazing and telling everybody to take a deep breath from Pips. But now we're at that point where if you don't update that product, now you're risking losing that business to the hotel down the street, right? So
that's right.
How are you balancing this?
For me, it underscores the importance of branding, right? Kind of knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what the brand promise is. It's obviously been tough to keep, right, some of these hotels refreshed. We try to constantly, right, use consumer research, market research, to guide us in the right direction with regards to what we offer, design, et cetera. But we've also tried to complement the portfolio by adding, right, new brands on the lifestyle side. So we see people, right, looking to align their experiences with a local destination. Right. And we've tried to, right, solidify our foothold in lifestyle with the Dream acquisition and some others. So for us, it's about making sure that we're staying true to who we are on the brand side. Right. But also making sure that we've got a complete portfolio.
Yeah, and talk about successful brands. I've been all over the Chotwal Lodge since I got to go there in December. If y'all haven't been there, I highly recommend you check this out, because if you're talking about secrets of a successful brand, they nailed it. They know exactly what they wanted to be, and then we're able to create an atmosphere where it played out in absolutely expert fashion, and some of the best food I ever had over there. So, Brad, over to you. How are you thinking about this? It seems like your company's been unveiling new brands year after year to better connect with some of those younger consumers and different psychographics than your traditional brands were.
Right, Glenn. So all of us are a family of brands, and all of us have an obligation to shareholders, for the most part. And look, all of us are driven by growth, right? But two really interesting things happen in the community. Number one, the consumer is changing. I'm hands down believe that there's a younger consumer that's making a very bit different buying decision than their father made. Right. Value is not so important today as experience.
Absolutely.
So whether it's the lifestyle brands or it's the food and beverage experience, whatever that may be, as a brand family, we have developers that want into our distribution systems. We have street corners that need various price points, and all of us are just in the business of delivering that.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And by the way, don't ever play the experience drinking game, because we use that word way too much, and it's not going to be healthy for you. But Noah, how do you see experience? Because I joke around, but I think it's become overused, right? It's kind of being described everything like, oh, it's a bed experience, it's a shower experience, it's a dining experience, it's a walking down the hallway experience, you know?
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
No, isn't it?
So how do you, because the reason why I ask you this question is because if it becomes too generic of a term, you kind of lose that focus. So how are you keeping focus on what the core experience should be for certain of your brands that help create a success factor for that guest and for the owner?
Well, so maybe first on the question about I don't know that it was a question, but why do we hear the word experience so much in our industry? I think it's actually one of the things that gives us hope for the future.
Right.
That we have seen a sort of maybe generational or transformational shift from a consumer that's focused on stuff to a consumer that's focused on, and I'm going to use the word experiences.
Yep, it's true.
And so
100%.
for our industry, that is good long-term news, right? Several of the big brand company CEOs a few years ago were talking about the golden age of travel. That sort of predated.
You mean like when you had lobster on airplanes, that sort of thing?
Exactly. And I believe that's where we are. So in terms of optimism about the future of our industry, that aspect of people searching out experiences versus things bodes well for the industry. And I think it's the reason that we hear that word so frequently at conferences like this and other places.
Yeah,
now,
agreed.
what it means to deliver experience is where the sort of rubber hits the road,
different
right? It's
all the
different.
time.
It's different depending upon the consumer. It's different depending upon the brand. And ultimately, it's about something that is identifiably connected to the brand in a way that somebody knows what they're going to get when they visit, you know, say the Chatwell Lodge or an Autograph Collection hotel or wherever they may be going. And that's that's really got to be the focus of our, I mean, we have a very talented and dedicated group of brand people and design people and construction people who think about and talk to consumers. I mean, we have incredible amounts of data around our loyalty consumers and traveling community in ways that allow us to understand what it is that they're looking for and ensure that we're delivering that to them wherever they may be and regardless of their trip purpose across that panoply of brands that we and my fellow panelists are offering to those consumers.
Excellent. Julienne?
And that's what consumers are talking about on TripAdvisor and other peer-reviewed sites is their experiences. They're not talking necessarily about the really cool design, although some are, and that can be
But without
important
it, you're still, you're nowhere, so it has to be there.
No, that's exactly right. And, you know, 20 years ago when I started in this business, we had those little books, right? And you could look up where the Courtyards were, the Motel 6s, the Holiday Expresses, right? And you had an experience at these hotels that you could trust would be the same at others because you didn't have any other way of sort of looking into it and understanding what would be in that market. And today, people want to know that they're in Nashville, that they're in Atlanta, that they're in, you know, wherever they are, especially when you start getting into the higher ADR price points and have that experience, so to say. And, you know, Noah said that he's glad that we're in that space, and I am too, because we do run the risk of becoming a commodity like the airline businesses have, where the airline businesses have become a means of transportation.
Right.
It's no longer an experience. We don't want to.
Oh, it's an experience.
Not a good one, right?
Yes.
We don't want to become that and end up just being a place people sleep and, you know, move on, right? We want people to have their celebrations and connect and have dinner and, you know, do all of the things that create that experience. So that's just expected now because I think of the younger generation and their focus on.
I think the social part is a really sort of interesting thing. If you just, you know, scan Instagram, scan TikTok, what are people putting pictures up of? They're not, you know, if somebody buys a new watch or a new car or a new bag or something like that, that's not what's going up into, you know, onto Instagram. It's the meal they had last night. It's the place they were with their family. It's the, you know, literally the Instagrammable moment at a hotel that they may be staying at. Those are the things, the pictures that you see, which is kind of evidence of this dynamic shift that we're talking about.
No doubt about it. And look, one other thing to add, because they're all talking about it, and that's the drift of developers toward independence.
Right.
It's happening. It's happening everywhere. I've got Best Westerns every day calling me going, hey, I'm going to recapitalize this asset. I want to move it to an independent. I want to soft brand it in Collections or World or whatever it may be. But there is definitely a drift to that.
So
and
then,
a big one.
Right.
And a big one. It's getting bigger.
Which makes sense, but then how are you compensating for that?
You know, for us, it's about rounding out the portfolio, right, with a brand for every stay
More choices.
or staycation. So, but I think to go back to the E word, right, experience. Yep. I think it's interesting that folks they're combining their stays. It's not just business anymore. It's not just leisure.
Don't say that word.
So it's also it's the BL word. It this week. But you're now managing different experiences all during one stay. And so for us, it's about connecting with the customer, making sure that they're getting what they need by brand.
That's a great point, because as people's travel habits are changing, and it's absolutely true, maybe not at this conference where everyone pops in and then goes off to the next city, but a lot of business travelers need to spend time in the city to really immerse themselves in that environment. And, you know, a lot of the hotels over the years have had to kind of adapt to that. I think of Courtyard by Marriott, the first brand that really appealed to that business traveler in that sense, right? But now that you're combining business and leisure, it's a good opportunity to introduce new brands or update specific brands to be able to appeal to both sides of those travel needs. Is that right, Noah?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, some of that has been thinking. So when we were together last year, talked then, we hadn't announced it yet, but you know, our entry into Apartments by Marriott Bonvoy was sort of driven in part by that you know, evolution of folks that were staying in places longer, using a more, or looking for a more residential style product that allowed them, because they were going to be in a place for a longer time, that allowed them to you know, blend their trip purpose, whether it was for, which by the way, I like blended trip purposes.
That's much better.
Is much better than that other BL word. That's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. But you know it's happening, and we're seeing it more and more. It's happening on what would have been shoulder days in the past, and you know people are staying for different reasons, and offering them a product that, and it's not just Apartments by Marriott Bonvoy, we're thinking about it sort of across the portfolio, that has greater appeal kind of regardless of whether somebody's in a hotel for business, leisure, or a combination of the two, is clearly driving a lot of the thinking behind brands and their evolution these days.
Yeah, makes sense. Anyone want to add to that?
I'll add just on the soft branding aspect, yes, there's a drive to go towards sort of more independent minded, but the fact that we bring a lot of the revenue and sales efforts and you know, the margins basically to the owners is critical. So having that sort of independent feel, but then the major brands behind it is critical.
It goes to the word trust.
Yeah.
Right? I want to do my own thing. I want to put my own fingerprint on it. I want to operate it the way I want to operate it, but I want to trust my brand family is standing behind me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and also I think that the soft brand evolution is also a result of the maturity of the operators, owners, and developers within our community that learned a lot of lessons from the great brands you all created that gave them the tools to find success, and that kind of ignites the spirit of entrepreneurship, particularly amongst second and third generation Americans that parents own their first hotels, for example, right?
Hands down, if you look at across this conference, right? The brain trust, just the knowledge and deep understanding of our business and how we operate at a core level.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just transforming it. They've got the capital, they've got the experience, they want to develop, at the end of the day, they want to develop what they want to stay in, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they're the new consumer.
We learned so much from our owners. I mean, some of the best brand ideas have hands down come from our ownership community.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're out there building the hotels, operating them, and making us successful.
That makes a lot of sense, because the hotel industry in the 90s went through a massive change from basically owning all the properties to the asset light model. So you really need those owners to keep you in touch with the actual running and operating of the hotels on a day-to-day basis. Not to say that these companies don't own any, but it's a very small percentage of what it used to be. So as you're moving forward, what are some of the things that you're thinking about, just for successful brands and making sure it doesn't cost too much? Actually, I don't really care too much about not having housekeeping every day. I was the guy back before COVID that was putting the do not disturb sign on his door. The hotel I'm staying at asked me if I wanted to do it, and they would give it to me if I had the status, but I refused because I don't care. I'm there 2 nights. So how are you thinking about some of the things that used to be sacrosanct but are now up for change, and that includes breakfast selections and all of that kind of stuff? Because I do think we came out of COVID with the ability to hit a great reset button on some of the out-of-control stuff that we've been doing. Jim, you've been nodding a lot, so I'll let you talk first.
I just nod generally in everything you say.
Very agreeable.
But we've taken the opportunity to reevaluate how we handle breakfast, particularly at Hyatt Place. For us, it's been an opportunity, I think, to rationalize the number of items that we put out every morning. So we want to focus maybe on smaller number of items, but a higher quality. We think that, as long as we're communicating that housekeeping changes to our guests, that most people are okay with it.
Yeah.
We're still giving folks the option to take daily housekeeping.
Sure, no matter what Twitter says, that's the truth.
That's right. But given the option, most people are opting out, and that's okay. So Julienne touched on it earlier, There's a lot of those kind of cost reduction initiatives that will carry through. I think design side, is something that we talk a lot about internally at Hyatt as well, and that's looking at sourcing alternative, FF&E, materials, anything that can help drive down the cost for owners to make the build a little bit more affordable these days in this environment that doesn't impact the guest. It's kind of the winning formula.
Oh,
yeah, Julienne?
Without exception, yeah. But it's still about owner flexibility at the street corner. So what's happened, is we've entered into an arena where developers say, hey, I want to do a little bit of something at the street corner to win my battle. And a great franchise company, some of the secret to success, will allow some owner flexibility at the street corner.
Right, and that's great. And I've seen a lot of the major companies that used to say no, saying yes to a lot of that stuff. But you have to have the right balance, because otherwise you lose the essence of that brand. So it must be a challenge for each of you every day to kind of find out the right percentage and proportion of what people can do differently that doesn't stray too much from the reason why they signed up with that flag in particular. Julienne, any thought?
Yeah, and I do think that the questions we have to ask ourselves and answer are, what is the brand, What are we delivering? What is the brand promise, and how do you bring that to fruition? Is it the FF&E package? Is it the service model? Is it the F&B offering? Is it all of those things? Because I think that does continue to evolve, and I think this sort of move towards really feeling like you're in a market versus anywhere USA is permeating through all of our brands to some extent. But to your original question, we collectively are all focusing on our loyalty programs and our parent company. That has become so critical for the success of all the brands, is making sure that we're keeping our consumers engaged in all of the markets that they go to, and competing a bit with the OTAs in making sure they're going to ihg.com or everybody else's to stay there and enjoy the experiences that they have, but also the way that they're recognized, And that used to be sort of table stakes where, you get an upgrade or you get a free room, and now it's become much more dynamic, and that's what we've done with IHG One Rewards, is just making sure that we are recognizing our customers the way that individual customer wants to be recognized, and having those options and choices. And that sort of parent company branding has become so much more important today than it was, 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. But the problem that I've seen, and hopefully we're close with technology to alleviate that, is I'm still finding that the brands don't really know who I am. But if we could get to that point, then why would I go to a third-party reservation service? Because you guys get me and you get my needs. But it's so complicated, because what I want when I'm coming to the Hunter conference versus what I want to get when I'm going to see some concerts with some buddies or something like that is completely different. And me as the consumer, I expect you to know everything at all times.
Well, it's technology and algorithms, Instagram knows exactly what I want, and I buy stuff because Instagram told me all the time, and it's kind of creepy.
TikTok.
And they're tech companies, And that's something we've not been. We've not been tech forward as an industry collectively. So really making sure that we're driving into our data, we're following algorithms. It's kind of creepy, to be honest, but it works, I mean, those Google algorithms are not a coincidence. The fact that they're telling you to buy a car when you're thinking about buying a car, I mean, it's all, it's tech, right?
Yeah.
I think it underscores the importance of that irrational loyalty that all of the brands are going for, and technology, right? So for us, we've got our guest experience manager. So as long as you are a World of Hyatt member, right, we can know that when Glenn checks in, he likes Tito's and chocolate chip cookies. So we should be engaging more closely with our guests, and there is a way to do that right through the technology platform.
By the way, it's Casamigos and pretzels.
Sorry. Brad, Tito's and chocolate chips for me. I didn't know what you wanted.
Brad, do you want to?
No, I agree with all of it. I mean, we're all focused on that 60 million, 125 million loyal consumers in our programs. The interesting thing is all of us have a legacy name in our portfolio today, right? And so how do we transform that legacy into call it new flavorful opportunities for consumers? And cross-branding, dual brand, all the things that we're doing, exploring new segmentation within the brands are working, but it's all part of it.
Well, I look back, and it's definitely a possibility. I look back at what Holiday Inn did, maybe it's 15 years ago already. It really felt like that brand was on the ropes. Then y'all put in like $1 billion into it and really reinvented it, and were able to, again, connect with the consumer. So brands that have that halo, good feeling, you can certainly transport to the 21st century. But I think the word technology is as vague as the word experience in a sense, and we make it an umbrella term where really what we're talking about is a lot of different components there. The one piece of technology that we just talked about, of course, is trying to get customers closer to the brand. But I think the big future from secrets of successful brands is being able to utilize technology in smart ways that enhances guest experiences while lowering the labor and allowing the human beings on site to be those ambassadors towards the experience way. So how are you all thinking about that and making your owners more successful through some of back of house technologies and stuff? Noah, have you thought about that?
And
probably all day.
And for the Marriott owners and franchisees in the room, they're probably well aware of this right now. We're on a Marriott sort of, I think, started a journey really before COVID and then kind of got a little bit disrupted by COVID, where we recognized that we had a fairly severe tech deficit in our enterprise. Because really from the beginning, you think about the systems that most of us use, they're really only made to do one thing, which is to sell a hotel room in a hotel, and they do that effectively. But there are tons of other ways that we can merchandise to consumers, and we were doing that very ineffectively. And there are tons of other ways for us to interact with and engage with consumers that enhance loyalty and keep them connected to us in ways that Instagram and other places do very, very well, and effectively, almost literally trying to create an addiction, to you on your device scrolling through. And so we're making a very sizable investment in basically replacing 3 core systems, which are our property management system, our reservation system, and our loyalty system over the next couple of years, that are focused on doing those things.
That's huge, because you had those systems pretty much before anybody else. So
we've had those systems that are now being held together by like bubble gum and Band-Aids because they've been in use for so long. And they are very, very, again, they are very effective at doing what they're doing, but increasingly sort of outdated and not serving us well anymore. And importantly, and this is maybe to the last part of your question, Glenn, from an associate experience, I mean, we've got associates that are coming into our hotels, in their 20s, looking at a screen that's unrecognizable to them, right? It's
with the green letters on the black screen.
They're like, what is
semicolon,
right? So our
welcome to 1980.
And we've now started to do some demos that we've shared and are working on. It's a single pane of glass enhancement, so that when Glenn Hausman shows up at the hotel, the check-in's a button, right? You see everything. You know the preferences of Glenn because they're showing up on that check-in screen.
That's great.
And so the process to get somebody, checked in or greeted, like they can spend more time being that brand ambassador, than being the person that looks like, has to hit 40 keystrokes. We call it a swivel chair because you got to get to here, and then you got to get to there, and then you got if I want to send you a mobile key, I got to get back here. All that stuff needs to go away, and will with this enhancement. It'll take us a couple of years to sort of get it fully rolled out.
It's a massive project.
But we think it's really a major leap forward and a game changer for the industry.
Yeah, Noah brings up a really good point, because it's not just about connecting to consumers, which we do through our apps with a lot of different platforms. It's also attracting young talent. To Noah's point, we do hear that, getting trained on our systems, being able to use our systems, beyond not recognizing what a keyboard and a screen are, is really a challenge. So it's not just connecting with consumers and making the systems efficient and cost-effective for our owners, but it's attracting young talent. That's huge. And we're not doing a great job of that right now across the industry. HLA is doing a lot of work in that regard, which is great, but part of making the training simple and being able to onboard people quickly, particularly in this environment where we have a lot of turnover, will solve a lot of issues that we have.
And might cut down on that turnover.
Right, exactly.
Which is, I guess, is the whole point. Jim?
I touched on the guest experience manager, which allows us to track guest preferences. But we've also launched a heat map, which is a 3D rendering of the hotel room by room that allows us to use guest feedback really to direct maintenance and housekeeping efforts. So if we know there's a VTAC in room 1306 that constantly has problems and gets bad feedback, we know to send maintenance there. If we know that room 1263 has been dirty for a week or so, we know that we need to get more housekeeping resources there.
Right.
So we'll continue to do that. I think that plays into the labor as well. And then the other thing that we're doing is, with Caption by Hyatt, we've gone to a digital mobile check-in. So it's not your typical registration desk. You can walk up to a kiosk, you can scan your registration and print out your room keys there, or go to a digital,
just bypass the front desk. And that's both a great opportunity, but also a challenge, because you don't want your hotels to be fungible, which could be if you don't have any of that interaction. For me, what you all do is so good. You're almost on par. I think everyone does 98% of everything well, but it's that last 1 or 2% where you really connect on a human level with the customer is what they take home with them. Going back to what you were saying, the pictures of the food and the stuff that they're doing on property, and that's all human driven. So we need to have great technology that allows the humans to excel and make those real connections with people, right?
Yeah, so like Noah said, we, like these other companies, recognize that our PMS system, our revenue management system, all of that needed to come into the modern day. We went out and actually bought one, We're just finishing now a complete new revenue platform that we're rolling out to our members. But from the technology side, so Aiden, I think many people saw in the past couple of months, we rolled out a hologram in Amsterdam where there is no kiosk. It's actually, it's a woman in a box. And
That's cool.
You check in right on the glass. There's nobody at the desk, and they can answer questions. There's someone actually feeding. So anyway, it's really interesting stuff to me. I don't completely understand how it works, but it was a woman in a box, and that's where you're checking in.
That's cool.
So anyway, we'll see. It's a great test, and we'll see if look, who knew 15 years ago that we'd all be checking in at Southwest Airlines on a kiosk?
One of my
so we're already there.
Yeah, totally. One of my customers, I won't mention the name because it's not fair on this panel, but their check-in kiosks, they have a human being that can be on the screen. So you still get that human interaction, which is pretty cool. It just happens to be someone in like Sri Lanka or something like that, who by coincidence is being paid 2 or 3 times what their wage is, but is still saving a lot of money for the hotelier, while giving the customer that sense that they could talk to a person if they're checking in at 2 in the morning. So I like that you're able to tie the technology back to humanity in a certain way that I think makes it a more cohesive experience. Jim?
I was just going to touch on what Julienne mentioned about front desk and hiring and training. We're still in a people business. Right. So, it's critical to have someone there if someone has a question or needs something. But, our operations folks spend a lot of time on making sure the front desk person isn't burdened with too much. Yeah. So we have to rely on technology either at point of arrival, pre-arrival, to do some of the communications for us. our person will be over
Right.
restocking the breakfast area, and then they're coming back, and someone's got a question about what they can do during the day, or they got an issue with the room, and kids today are just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they
Absolutely.
want. We've got to evolve. My 21-year-old, my 25-year-old, they want something very different when they travel. Part of this technology experience is that difference.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And us older folks are kind of locked into where we are, but the younger folks, digital nomads and stuff, being able to work and play from wherever they want to go. Right. Plus, everybody, like Noah said, doesn't want things anymore. They want to do stuff instead. Right. That's going to give all of you, I think, incredible opportunity over the next 10 years or so to really get closer to customers to do things no matter what they're doing. Before we wrap up, curious as to what you think the secret is for the next successful brand in the future. What's the next big trend? We've been talking about extended stay for a while. I'm getting tired of that, although it's I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Though it's still huge, but I'm looking forward. I'm looking out to the horizon. I'm thinking connecting with the outdoors is going to be our next giant trend. Do you agree with me? If not, what trend do you see?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly you've seen. I think you may be onto something with sort of connecting the outdoors. We've seen rapid growth in that space by
because we've seen brands like even go towards biophilic design, for example, bringing that outdoors in. I just think we're going to get more outdoors. Yeah.
Look, I mean, maybe it's a little bit hard. We've announced a couple of new things in the last 6-9 months. Our entry into the mid-scale space with an acquisition in Mexico, the Apartments by Marriott Bonvoy launch. So, sometimes we need to digest a few of the, the meals that we've eaten before we start thinking about the next big thing. So, for us at the moment, we're focused on the core issues, which is, again, continuing to drive. We've got 31 or 32 brands now with the City acquisition when it closes. So continuing to share that from a guest perspective and an owner perspective, as you started this panel, Glenn, we're delivering as much as we can. So I'll let my fellow panelists here talk about maybe the next big thing.
I have a hard time
and then we'll just copy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Most honest thing ever said.
Yeah. I think that permeating wellness through all of the brands across the table is probably going to continue. We acquired Six Senses a few years ago, which has become a great halo for us. They are a wellness experience brand, and we've got and we've got some other things that we're doing that is really consumer driven, right? People want to be taken care of. They're thinking about what's in their water, right? They're thinking about what they're eating. Cage-free eggs has been part of sort of everybody's brand ethos lately. So that piece is not going to go away, and I think that's going to continue to evolve, again, because of the younger traveler and their thought about how they're spending their money and how that impacts their own well-being.
And being ethical is one of the core core premises of IHG.
Yeah, many of us have gotten away from single-use plastics. We're doing bulk amenities. I mean, that's going to continue to evolve. We're going to see more.
Excellent.
Residential style amenities.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's right.
Jim?
I would agree with Julienne on the wellness front.
Yep.
Right? That's what brought us to Miraval. I think ESG, environmental, social governance. I'm not betting on trends, right? So if I think about a successful brand, it's got long-staying power. So for me, right, the secret is not one thing, but a combination.
Yep.
And for us, it's really the coordination and collaboration between branding, design, development, right, operations, and then our commercial services engine. So,
great. Brad, any thought on that?
Absolutely, Glenn.
Final words after that.
So two things. Number one, secret of a successful brand is in my organization, right, is perfecting the things that we're already in. We launched into extended stay with At Home. We're in the upscale segment with over 500, I think, today soft brands around the world. We've got to perfect that, so we have a job to do internally. But I do think what trend that most interests me is you watch where the workforce goes, that's where the hotel business goes ultimately. That's who's staying in our hotels. We're all talking about it. We're thriving on it. Watch what those young people want inside of Google, inside of Microsoft, inside of the big organizations. They deliver first
You're talking about the ones that are still employed by those organizations.
Employed. There's still plenty of them.
Right.
Plenty of them employed. So, but at the end of the day, right, it's what Google is doing, or not Google, but the big organizations are doing to attract talent is what we will do internally to keep that talent in our hotels.
Right.
So I think hotels follow the workforce at the end of the day. Workforce does not follow us.
I think, one thing that I would add, we all touched on it, but if there was a secret, I think it's the listening to our guests, our customers, right, and our owners. I mean, they're the ones who are closest to it.
Yep.
And so as long as we are incorporating their feedback where it makes sense into our brands, into our design, right?
I think there's a bigger secret too, Jim, and let me just touch on it and then we'll keep going. And that is, we're in the development business up here, and the development teams have a responsibility to grow prudently next to our existing members and owners and franchisees. And that's the key, right? How much saturation can they actually take in this type of market? So anyway, just
prudent growth is pretty easy these days.
Any final thoughts, Julienne?
Really. I think everybody needs to just continue to be patient. This industry is cyclical, development is cyclical. We'll get through this blimp as well. As Noah mentioned earlier, those who are really prudent about how they obtain financing and leverage their capital will continue to ride through. I also started right after 9/11 in this industry and have seen a number of debts. So it's a long-term view. Just keep the long-term view.
Excellent. Noah?
Always good to be with you, Glenn. Thanks for all you do for our
You're
industry.
You're exciting host.
Pleasure. I love this stuff. So let me just wrap it up for all of you guys. So the secrets of successful brands is really going to come on many different fronts. It's a fundamental understanding by the development community to create great properties that are affordable to build and operate, but it's also equally important to be able to connect in unique and individualized ways with that changing consumer, whether it's being there to give them the opportunity to be successful at that next business meeting the next day, or to be able to make sure you set the stage for incredible experiences and life moments and those things that matter to each and every one of us. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what Brad said: trust. Trust between the developers, trust between the owners, and trust between all of us and our incredible consumer audience. Let's hear it for these guys over here. How awesome are they?
Puppies, 3 p.m.
Yep.
Pet the puppies at 3 p.m. right out back.
All right, who doesn't love petting puppies? Might not be as exciting as this, but thank you so much for being here. We love you all. See you next time.
Pet the puppies, Jim. Pet the puppies.